Hello, everybody. Today is April 11th, 2020, Saturday, day before Easter. This is coronavirus update by Heerak. And today we are going to talk about the Middle East and the story of two sons of Abraham. It will be an exciting episode, so stay tuned. And you will learn a lot today, as always, that will enrich your life and also help you survive COVID-19. My name is Heerak Christian Kim. I'm an independent candidate for U.S. Congress in Virginia's 8th District. You can visit my campaign website at www.heerakcongress.com, heerakforcongress.com. And today we see that we are continuing the tradition of Holy Week in terms of daily number of deaths being around 2,000 American citizens. So this is 5th day in a row where we have about 2,000 people dying. So that means in the last 5 days, we had 10,000 Americans die in the United States of America. 10,000. It's very disturbing, obviously, because it's just 5 days. You have 10,000 people dying. And this is Holy Week. So it's every day we have 2,000 people die. And interestingly enough, it was 2,000 years ago that Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross. And you cannot but wonder if God has a sense of time and he's trying to maybe send a message to us. 5 days in a row of about 2,000 people dying. And in the Hebrew tradition, they have this mysticism called gematria, where numbers signify things, and that's from the Middle Ages. As you know, I'm an expert of Jewish studies. I've researched Jewish identity for over 3 years with funding from various research funding agencies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So I've lived over 3 years in Israel, and I'm fluent in Hebrew. So maybe I will talk about this some other time, but today we are going to talk about something else. In one day, we had 1,967 deaths. So yesterday, April 10th, 2020, Good Friday, 2020, we had total American death at 18,637. In 24 hours, we had 1,967 people die. So the total death count is at 20,604 US citizens who have died. In 1 week, we have 50% of the total deaths. So from the very beginning in the USA until the Holy Week, we had around 10,000 people die, a little bit less than 10,000, 8,000 something. As we entered the Holy Week, we had increased to 20,000. So if you see Meet the Press show from last Sunday, so about 6 days ago, the death toll in the United States was 8,000 something. Now we're at 20,000. So that is highly disturbing, very troubling. And we now understand why Surgeon General said that this week was going to be Pearl Harbor when he was interviewed at Meet the Press last Sunday. Confirmed cases are rising around 30,000. It was 500,399 yesterday. And today it's at 529,740. Now, we talked about Asia, COVID-19 in Asia, and we saw that except for China, the numbers of people who died from COVID-19 was minuscule in Asia. So if you like, just watch the episode from yesterday to see the top 5 COVID-19 case countries and their corresponding deaths. So I thought you may be curious about what's going on in the Middle East. This being Holy Week, and we know that Jesus Christ was crucified in Jerusalem, which is in the Middle East. So I thought maybe you would like to know what's going on in the Middle East. So I bring you top 5 COVID-19 cases in the Middle East. So 5 countries in the Middle East with the largest number of COVID-19 cases. Number 1 is Iran at 70,029, and the total death is at 4,357. So they're number 1 in the Middle East. As you know, Iranians are actually Persians. They're not Arabs. There are Arabs living in Iran, but Iranians go back all the way to the Persian Empire. And if you saw the movie 300, it's a movie about a superior army with superior soldiers, the best soldiers in the world, but they numbered 300. And there were Greeks. And then the Persian Empire invaded, and they were numerous in number. They weren't as good as the elite soldiers, at least in the movie. That was the narrative. But because numbers always win, and that's why the 300 lost. And so the Persians are famous for their empire. That empire was a great empire. So I know the movie 300 had kind of a pro-Greek bias in trying to depict Greek soldiers as superior, but Persian soldiers were amazing as well. Obviously, you have to have a pretty amazing soldiers to expand your empire that widely, right? In the Korean War, after General MacArthur came to Korea, he was able to beat back the North Korean forces. But China sent down 1 million soldiers, and they almost retook all of Korea. And so they agreed on a truce at 38th parallel. And Chinese soldiers who came down at that time did not even have functioning guns. So US soldiers were killing thousands of soldiers, and they just kept coming. It's like a zombie movie. And that comes to show you, you can't have all the weapons in the world. If you have people just keep coming at you, willing to die, it's hard to win a war, especially if they have a lot of people. So that was a lesson from the Korean War. And that's the kind of theme that the movie 300 has. If you haven't seen the movie 300, you should see it. It's a good movie. Now, Iran. What interesting fact, another interesting fact can I tell you about Iran? Abraham actually came from that area. So you know how we talked about Israelites being a race? Actually, Israelites are of the same race as Iranians, going all the way back. Because Abraham's father, Tehran, was from the region of Iran. So in terms of blood and race, Abraham, who's the father of the Jewish race, came from Iran. And so people in Iran area who can trace their line through there can say, they go all the way back to Tehran. which is Abraham's father. So they're the same race. So Abraham, we can actually say is of Iranian descent. Now God decided to make a people out of Isaac and Jacob. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they're three generations. But racially, ethnically, originally, Abraham was of Iranian descent, or ancient Persian, Proto-Persian descent. So that's an interesting fact if you did not know it, but now you know it. So keep tuning in, subscribe to this YouTube channel, because you're going to learn a lot of interesting historical facts. You're going to be able to think better because of this program. So this program will upgrade your intelligence in ways that you cannot even begin to imagine. So subscribe to this YouTube channel and check back at every episode so you can learn something new. In the Middle East, number 2 is Turkey, and they have 52,167 cases, and their death toll is 1,101, and it's climbing, so it's of concern. Turkey is a place where the seat of Christian empire used to be, right? Constantinople. And then it became Istanbul. And there's a song, Constantinople, Istanbul. If you don't know that song, Google it, find out. It's kind of catchy, so you can sing along to it. But yes, it used to be completely a Christian empire, and then it became an Ottoman empire and became Muslim. And so the capital of Christian empire, Constantinople, was conquered, and it became a center of Ottoman Empire, Muslim state. Now, number 3 is Israel. Israel has 10,743, and they have 101 deaths. You may be thinking, wow, the chosen people of God is blessed. They only have 101 deaths from COVID-19. Yes, I guess you can say that, but let's go down to the next level. 4th place is Saudi Arabia, which is a bigger country, and they only have 4,033 cases and only 52 deaths. And United Arab Emirates, which is right next to Saudi Arabia, they have 3,736 cases, but only 20 deaths. So, if we are going to talk about blessing, it's hard to say Israel is the most blessed in the Middle East, because Iranians are not Arabs, right? They're Persian. Turkish people are not Arabs either. They're Turkish. And Saudi Arabia, they're Arabs. And United Arab Emirates, they're Arabs. So it seems like, at least from this case, Arabs are doing better than Israel, which has some Arab citizens as well, as Jewish citizens. So let's go to the next topic that kind of is related. The story of 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. They're both sons of Abraham, and we say that the Jewish people came from the line of Isaac, and the Arabic people came from the line of Ishmael. Now, the story is kind of interesting, and you probably have studied it in your Sunday school. If you haven't, it's sad, because it's an interesting story, and also is a foundation story of 2 very important civilizations, right? Christian civilization and Muslim civilization. Because sons of Ishmael eventually became Muslim, and sons of Isaac became Jewish, and then became a Christian empire, and it spread through the Gentiles. So it doesn't have as strong of a genetic tie in the Christian empire, but kind of a spiritual tie. Ishmael, there was a kind of more of a blood tie as well, although there are a lot of Muslims now who are not Arabs. For example, the biggest Muslim country with over 100 million people is Indonesia, which is an Asian empire. And if you go to Indonesia, they look more like me because they're Asian. But anyway, going back to Isaac and Ishmael, so there was Abraham, and he came from the region of Iran. You see there, Iran, and then he walked toward the west, so passing over present-day Iraq, which was ancient Babylonia, and then going over past Syria, and then arriving at Israel. You see Syria, you see Lebanon, you see the West Bank. So that's the region of Israel. Israel is right next to Jordan. And so, so you have Abraham, who went from Iran all the way to the West Bank area. That's where Israel is, and you see the word Israel there. So that's where it is. And Abraham settled there. And because Abraham came from Iran, there were people living in that area, right? Arabs were living in that area. Basically, Palestinians are kind of descended from there. But you have the Phoenicians. You have different ethnic groups, but you know, you have people living there, Syro-Phoenicians, as we say. So Abraham came to a country which was not his country. He lived in Iran. His father is from Iran. But God called him out of Iran and brought him to Palestine area, or ancient Canaan, the land of the Canaanites. And so Abram tried to settle down there, but he was a foreigner, so he was kind of mistreated by Canaanites. He dug a well, and then people come and push him out of the well because in the desert area, water is valuable. So you'd go from one area, dig a well, he got pushed out of there, got bullied, went to another area and dug a well. He could push that. He never completed a settlement anywhere for a long time because he just kept being pushed out before he could just kind of complete his home. And so he went from one place to another place and then pushed out to another place. He was just kind of bullied around and kicked around and pushed around, and he went all over the place. And God said, well, I'm going to give you this area. I'm going to bless you. And when God blesses you, you can see it. It's not like it's invisible. When God blessed Abraham, he eventually became one of the wealthiest men in Canaanite area. But he struggled and struggled and struggled because he's not originally from Canaan, that area. He belonged to the people there who were the ancestors of Palestinians, present-day Palestinians. And so Abraham was there, and then he had a wife who was barren. She could not have a child. And Abraham was depressed because, your line dies with you, right? And so if you have 12 sons, your line continues and you become a father of a great ethnic group. You can create your own ethnic group if you have like 10 kids and each of your 10 kids have like 10 kids. In like 3 generations, you have over 100 people. That's like, so it's like your ethnic group, right? You can start your own ethnic group. But so having a lot of children, that's a great blessing, obviously. And Bible says, be fruitful and multiply. And so that is considered to be a blessing in the biblical sense if you have a lot of kids and a lot of grandchildren. And even today, a lot of people count their blessings through how many children they have and how many grandchildren they have. And you may have heard people say that. But Abraham's wife, Sarah, was barren. And God said, I'm going to give you a son. And Abraham could not believe it. And Sarah was old, so she could not believe it. And angels of the Lord said, no, you're going to get a son. And Sarah was kind of laughing because I'm so old. How am I going to get a son? And Abraham was like around 100 years, you know, it was closing on 100 years old. And so uh, they named Isaac because Sarah was laughing, right? Laughter. So there's several meanings. Sarah was laughing, so Isaac's name is like laughter. And also, when Isaac was born, there was a lot of joy, so there was laughter. And so, in that sense, there one word can have more than one meaning. Now, before Isaac was born, Sarah did not believe that she could conceive. So what did she do? She had an Egyptian slave. God did not condemn slavery, right? Because Sarah owned the slave, and God did not order Sarah to emancipate Hagar, her slave. So Bible never condemned slavery in the Old Testament or the New Testament. In fact, in the New Testament, St. Paul told Onesimus, who was a slave, to go back to his slave master and serve him. And St. Paul even goes as far as to say, slaves, you must obey your slave masters as if they're like Jesus Christ. Like the way the church obeys Jesus Christ, slaves are to obey their slave masters. So that's in the New Testament. So neither the New Testament or the Old Testament condemns slavery. America had slaves. God freed slaves because African American slaves eventually became Christians, and they cried out to the Lord and say, we want to be free. God answered their prayer. Doesn't mean that God changed his mind about slavery, because Bible is God's word, and Bible does not say slavery is sin. So slavery is not sin according to God. God is saying yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Slavery itself is not inherently evil, because if slavery were inherently evil, then God would have abolished slavery in the Old Testament or in the New Testament. God does not abolish slavery because slavery itself is not evil in the sight of God. So men's ways are not God's ways, and if somebody tells you slavery is sin, they're lying to you, because God defines what sin is, not human beings. And in the Bible, slavery is never sin. It's not sin in the Old Testament. It's not sin in the New Testament. St. Paul told slave to go back to the slave master. So slavery itself is not sin. And, some people try to say, well, slavery was different in the New Testament. No, they actually bought slaves. And some of the slave masters actually raped their slaves. So it's not that different from what happened, in other countries. And we see a similar theme here. Sarah owned an Egyptian slave that she bought with money that Abraham made, because Abraham became a rich man. Right? If you're poor, you're not going to have a slave. But Abraham was rich, so he had a lot of slaves. He was a slave owner. Abraham was a slave owner and had slaves. And so Sarah had her own slave, which was Hagar, an Egyptian slave that was bought with money, that was a property, chattel property, owned by Abraham and Sarah as property. And so Sarah felt like she wasn't going to have a child. So she said, well, Hagar is my slave that I own as a slave master. And so I am going to use my property to get what I want. That was the thinking that Sarah had. So Sarah ordered Hagar to have sex with Abraham. And obviously, Hagar was a slave and she was property. So she thought she had to do what Sarah commanded her. Obviously, it was wrong for Sarah to command Hagar, her slave, to have adultery, because adultery is wrong. So obviously, slavery is not condemned in the Old Testament or the New Testament, but adultery is, right? So because that's sin. Adultery is sin, slavery is not sin. So that's the difference, right? Because God said adultery is sin, and that's why it's sin. God never said slavery is sin, so slavery is not sin. But you see the difference? God determines what sin is, not human beings. And so Sarah sinned because she ordered Hagar to have sex, adultery, basically forcing her, because what choice did Hagar have, right, as a slave? I mean, she might have been killed if she didn't obey, right? And obviously Hagar is responsible as well. She should have resisted, but it was in a difficult situation. So Hagar have sex with Abraham, and Abraham basically raped Hagar, right? Hagar could have formed a family with another slave, and that happened in those days, just like it happened during American slavery. Slaves had children with other slaves. And maybe there was some guy that Hagar liked that she wanted to be faithful to. But Sarah was not going to let that happen. So Hagar was basically raped by Abraham, and Hagar has a child named Ishmael. And Sarah basically makes Ishmael their child. It's like, so basically Hagar was a surrogate. And Abraham loves Ishmael, and so, but God says, no, I'm going to be giving you your own son between Abraham and Sarah. And so Sarah did not have faith, and Abraham did not have faith, unfortunately, because God promised them a son. They should have just stuck with the faith. But they didn't have faith. Faith is a gift of God, and they just did not have it. But eventually Isaac was born, and jealousies entered in. People get jealous all the time. And Sarah said, I want Ishmael and Hagar gone. Because Sarah was jealous of Ishmael, because Abraham loved Ishmael, because Ishmael was his son. But they did another evil thing in casting Ishmael and Hagar out. So Abraham and Sarah just expelled Ishmael and Hagar, his mother, out. And they're slaves from Egypt, so they're just headed back to Egypt. And they were crying out to the Lord. They're saying, Lord, this is so unfair. And you know what God did? God had mercy on Ishmael and Hagar and saved them, and promised to make great nation out of Ishmael. And God kept his promise, because descendants of Ishmael became Arabs who settled in Arab countries, and they have tremendous amount of oil and wealth. They don't have to even go to college or school to get all this oil and wealth, because God gave them all this wealth. Yes, that's how God's blessings look. When God blesses you, you will see it. And what we're experiencing in America with COVID-19 death, that is not blessing from God, because you know when you're being blessed from God, and you know when you're being cursed from God. And when God blessed Ishmael and Hagar, that God will give them wealth, you see all those nice cars before you. That's what blessing of God looks like. Now, and obviously God made Abraham a millionaire as well, because that's what blessing of God looks like. All right, you know when you're being blessed by God, because it's self-evident. Now, so that's the story of Ishmael. What happened to Isaac? Isaac grew up with love of his father and mother. And one day, God said, Abraham, I want you to sacrifice Isaac. And the story is called Sacrifice of Isaac or Binding of Isaac because Abraham bound him with the ropes. Because Abraham obeyed God when God says you have to sacrifice Isaac. He obeyed God. And some say it's test of Abraham's faith. Because remember when God promised to Abraham that he was going to give him a son, Abraham and Sarah both did not have faith. That's why they forced their slave to have sex with Abraham so that their progeny could become a substitute son for Abraham and Sarah because Sarah was barren, could not have a child. So maybe God's like, I want to test the faith of Abraham. I mean, obviously God knows everything, but God wanted Abraham to go through this testing phase. So God told Abraham, kill your son. And to Abraham's credit, he was going to kill Isaac just because God commanded him to. And, you know, obedience to God is important to God. It's hard to see the purpose. I mean, why would God order you to kill your son, right? But Abraham did not question God. And so Abraham took Isaac and they were going up, and Abraham was really old, right? It's way past 100 by that time. And so Isaac was carrying a lot of things, you know, for the sacrifice. So Isaac was like, Daddy, you know, well, we have all these things to sacrifice, but we don't even have an animal. So Abraham is like, God's going to give us a sacrificial animal. But obviously Abraham was going to plan on killing Isaac. So when they went to the top of the mountain, Abraham put rope around Isaac, as you see in the picture, and tried to kill him with his dagger, sacrificial dagger. Now, Isaac must have had faith as well, because let's say you're a teenage boy who's carrying all this stuff. Are you strong? Yes, you are. So if your dad is trying to bind you and kill you, what would you do? What would your son do if you tried to do this to your son? Think about it. I mean, he can easily overpower you and kill you, right? Or defend himself, or at least run away. But Isaac did not run away. How is Abraham, the old guy, going to chase him and catch him if he starts to run? But obviously, Isaac submitted to his father. So that, some people say, is the faith of Isaac. He was willing to obey his father, even to the point of death. And Abraham was willing to obey God to the point of his son's death. And most fathers know they love their son's life, treasure their son's life more than their own life. And that's why fathers say, take me, don't kill my son, you know, if they're captured by, kidnappers. But God stopped Abraham's hand through the angel of the Lord just before the dagger cut through the heart of Isaac to kill Isaac. So the happy ending is God found a sacrificial animal that they sacrificed together, and they went back happy. Abraham passed his test of faith. Isaac passed his test of faith, and God was satisfied. So one question you may want to ask yourself is God testing your faith today or tomorrow? God wants to see if you're going to be faithful, even if it means you may die, even if it means your son may die. That's who God is. God considers faith and obedience far more important than life. And that is a theme that runs from book of Genesis to book of Revelations. And that is why Christian martyrs are glorified. God can always protect and save lives of Christians who are threatened by enemies of Christians. I mean, all 11 apostles of Jesus were killed for their Christian faith by Roman democracy because they refused to say that every other religion saves in the same way Christianity does. Jesus' disciples, apostles, 11 apostles, because Judas Iscariot was a traitor and sold Jesus Christ out for 30 shekels of silver to Jewish religious leaders to be crucified. So the 11 apostles who were faithful, who did not betray Jesus, they start sharing that Jesus is the only way to salvation. No one comes to the Father except through Jesus. All the other religions are false religions. Only Christianity is a true religion. Only way you can go to heaven is through Jesus Christ. And Roman democracy says that is religious intolerance. We are a democracy. We are the Roman Empire. We are democracy just like Greece was a democracy. And in democracy, we say all religions are equal. And so you must not attack other religions or say your religion is a true religion. That is a crime against our democratic values of equality. Equality is a democratic value. It's not a Christian value or a Jewish value. Nowhere in the New Testament does it say equality is important. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it say equality is important. Equality is a value in democracy. It was a value in Greek democracy. It was a value in Roman democracy. It's a value in American democracy. It's not a value in the New Testament. It's not a value in the Old Testament. But that's an important point to point out because Bible is what it is, right? You cannot change the Bible just because you don't like what it's saying. And in the Roman Empire, they wanted to kill 11 apostles because they would not change. They kept saying Jesus is the only way to salvation and all the other religions are false. And Roman Empire said, you're just offensive. You're telling us our religion is false. How dare you? You are in a democracy. You must respect other religions. If you refuse to respect other religions, we're going to throw you in jail. We're going to execute you. And that's what Roman democracy did because they valued equality of all religions, which obviously Christianity cannot agree with. Because Christianity says only Jesus Christ can save, and eternity can only be arrived at through Jesus Christ. And that's why 11 apostles were all killed in the Roman democracy. And St. Paul was killed in the Roman democracy as well, because he also preached that only way to salvation is through Jesus Christ. And for 2,000 years, true Christians have been emphasizing that. And so that's the theme of Christianity, that Christianity is the only true religion. And a lot of people sacrifice themselves, go to jail, and get killed by official state-sanctioned court system or persecution, and so you can read about all the Christians who've died as Christian martyrs throughout the history. Ireland killed all the missionaries until St. Patrick. Missionary after missionary who went there to convert them, saying Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation. All your Celtic pagan religions are false. They're all killed. All these monks and priests who went there to convert Irish people were killed. It's only after St. Patrick that Ireland was converted to Christianity. A lot of Christian missionaries were killed by Irish people before St. Patrick. We celebrated St. Patrick's Day in February. But as we head on toward Easter, I think it's an important point to remember that the message of Easter is that Jesus conquered death so that those who believe in him can have eternal life. Jesus does not give eternal life to everybody. Jesus only gives eternal life to those who say Jesus is the only way to salvation. All the other religions are false religions. And that was very offensive to Roman democracy, and that's why 11 of his apostles were all killed by Roman democracy for hate crimes, for intolerance, for offending other people, for religious intolerance, for opposing religious liberty of other religions. And so you can see Easter has meaning. What is the true meaning of Easter? Maybe it's time that you start reflecting upon this as we go on to Easter 2020 in the midst of coronavirus, which is killing 2,000 United States citizens every day during Holy Week. Why? Why? You may be asking. I hope you will stay safe in the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, holding on to the true meaning of Easter. And I hope that you and your family will survive this pandemic, which seems to be continuing and expanding throughout the United States of America. Be well. Happy Easter.